Okay, unfinished business, continued discussion regarding possible zoning ordinance amendment relative to zoning districts for signs.
All right, Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners, recall on February 5th, we initiated a rather informal discussion about amending section 1719 of the zoning ordinance that regards signage, placement and dimensional standards for signage in the county. And this came about via directive from the Board of Commissioners in late January, I believe it was, their second meeting in January, to take a look specifically at the dimensional standards for freestanding signs in our commercial development zones. In particular, what we currently allow for the maximum sign face, which is 80 square feet. Obviously, there are another dimensional standard to consider would be maximum height. But the board, in my understanding, is specifically directing us to look intently at what we currently allow for maximum square footage for those sign faces, and to see if we can employ a measure of flexibility here. And that's really what I'm going to focus on this evening, is to try to open up a discussion amongst you regarding some flexibility we might employ, some options that might be considered appropriate given certain conditions. As I touched upon, currently section 1719 allows up to 80 square feet for each sign face for a freestanding sign in commercial development. However, it is noted that that same section in commercial development also allows for up to 3 freestanding signs. They may each be up to 25 feet in height, and again, 80 square feet per sign. So conceivably, although unlikely, but conceivably, one could have 3 signs on a commercial development zone parcel, each up to 80 square feet for a total of 240 square feet of signage, sign face area. So I think we want to tighten that up, but in thinking about that, we need to again consider what we might adopt in terms of allowing a measure of flexibility for sign face area, particularly in commercial development. And in my memo, I touch upon several approaches we might consider in order to maybe employ some flexibility here in commercial development. This graphic is pulled right from 1719 of the zoning ordinance. And I have highlighted the columns for commercial development and the types of signage that is allowed in that zoning district. And the table at the bottom regards specifically freestanding signs. And I won't belabor that because that just echoes what I said earlier about the dimensional standards. But in commercial development, there are 3 types of signs currently that require a zoning permit. Freestanding, what are called marquee signs, which are typically signs that you see, for example, at the Kingston Movie Theater in Cheboygan. The 3rd type of sign that requires a zoning permit in commercial development is a rooftop sign, a roof sign. All the other signs that you see there banner, projecting, and so on do not require zoning permit. So this slide, I think, gets to the heart of the matter, and somewhat elaborates on the memo in terms of presenting some scenarios we might consider for affording some flexibility here. So again, 80 square feet is the current maximum standard for sign face area in commercial development. One of the things we can take a look at, and this is one of many approaches we might consider here, maintain that maximum square footage if a property has, say, up to 200 feet of public road frontage. But allow for a fairly strong measure of flexibility per these bullet points here. For example, we should consider permitting larger individual sign face areas as a function of distance of public road frontage and/or facade size. In fact, regarding signage as it relates to facades, the master plan does talk about that, updating the sign standards to allow sign size to be what we've done proportional to building facade size. So that's one thing we can take a look at in terms of employing some flexibility here. Bullet point, the second bullet point regarding freestanding signs would suggest allowing larger individual signs, or larger individual sign surface area to be more precise, larger than the current 80-foot standard, but with the caveat that one would be prohibited from having additional signage, additional freestanding signage. So again, currently, one is allowed up to 3 freestanding signs in commercial development. In exchange for that, if you will, we would perhaps allow a larger sign face, 90 square feet, 100 square feet. That's a number that we need to discuss, certainly. Also, alternatively, in conjunction with a larger sign surface area, we might consider permitting freestanding signs greater than 25 feet in height. Generally speaking, the taller the sign, the more visible it is. So if we don't look at sign face, then maybe we look at that, or we look at both dimensional standards, sign face area and height. The other thing to possibly consider is, again, permitting larger individual freestanding signs, the surface area, in lieu of other permitted signs, such as wall and canopy signs. So, per the table that I referred to in a previous slide, there are an array of signs that would be allowed in commercial development. You have window signs and wall signs in particular. What we might consider is an exchange, if you will, for one of those wall signs or a canopy sign. One would be allowed, say, an additional freestanding sign, or a freestanding sign that is larger than the current standard that would be allowed. There are a number of ordinances that take into consideration frontage. And it stands to reason that the greater your frontage, there's a stronger rationale for a larger sign. That is something I think is a very reasonable consideration moving forward in trying to adopt some measure of flexibility here for freestanding signs in particular, commercial development. The other thing that I believe one of you, perhaps it was Sharon, touched upon last time was the relationship between signage and maximum speed on a given roadway. Now, commercial corridors in Cheboygan County, namely State Route 27, as you likely know, the speed limit varies. In the heart of Indian River, for example, in the town center, if you will, it's 35 miles per hour. And correspondingly, generally speaking, you see smaller signage. You have a more narrow section of road there. It's a more walkable area. Correspondingly, or consequently, signage is smaller, and that's what you see in many places that have sort of a similar layout or aesthetic. As you travel south on M27, it increases to 45 miles per hour. And then I believe it's beyond, is it
It's right there, the pet, in Indian River Pet Resort.
Pet Resort, then it increases to 55 in that area. So, that's another sort of facet of this that we may want to take a look at. I don't know that we necessarily have to complicate things that much by looking into that. We certainly can, but I think it's worthwhile to take a look at this and see if some flexibility can be exercised here. Given what I've trotted out, and perhaps one or more of you have some ideas that we might take a look at as we move forward. One of the things I should point out in the staff report, in the memo, rather, I think I had mentioned some other things we might consider that I didn't include in the PowerPoint. There's one in particular that's noteworthy, and that is it's on page 2 of the memo. Would the sign's applicability and function serve our tourism economy? Now, interestingly enough, there's at least one community in Michigan that takes that into consideration. My concern about that, and I have to give it legal counsel, is does that fly in the face of Reed versus Town of Gilbert? In other words, is that content related? Would we be making a decision based in part anyway on the content of the sign? If it's a tourism related sign, one might construe that that is governing or regulating based on content. So that is something that, moving forward might be worthy of consideration, but again, have to check with legal counsel to see how that might be folded into the ordinance as, at least a minor consideration. I don't know the answer to that. And some of the other bullet points on page 2 of the memo that I bring up as possible factors for consideration. Would the sign be in harmony with the essential spirit of the master plan? Would the sign be part of a coordinated sign plan or joint signage plan? That's a little easier, I think, to consider without running afoul of, say, Reed versus Town of Gilbert. As I think all of you are aware, in the case of requests for variances from our dimensional standards for signs, and this holds true for any variance, actually, there are 5 standards for practical difficulty or hardship that the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals, reviews when they consider a variance application. these types of considerations wouldn't be, or couldn't be, as far as I know, be a part of those 5 standards for practical difficulty. But it certainly begs discussion with legal counsel to see, as we move forward, if we can incorporate some of this into an amendment. But circling back, I think we've got some meat to chew on here in terms of how we want to look at employing some flexibility standards. Madam Chair.
I will first go ahead. I think we don't have to complicate a solution here. We know what the Board of Commissioners want. They would like to make certain that the Indian River business gets the size of the sign that they purchased in the agreement. And I think there's a couple ways to go about it. We can maybe look at the road frontage and allow 100 square feet. While we're doing it, I think we should look at the electronic signs, and I think that would be a simple. To get into all these other things, I think that the ZBA should use the same standards they have. They've used them forever. It's only happened twice in 15 years. It's one concern in the Indian River Business District. Let's correct it. Commissioner will be happy. We'll have an amendment that's easy to change instead of going through all of these things. To me, we got other things to do. Our sign ordinance has not been problematic to this point. So let's make it easy, and it's an easy thing to take care of.
Chuck?
Well, I kind of second Mike's comments. I don't think there's any sense in throwing new rules at the ZBA for signs. If we're going to change the sign requirements, then change it in the ordinance and forget it. Don't try and make a whole new subject for the ZBA to look at. I would like to point out to people how much we're talking about here. Look at that wall right there. Mr. Moore pointed this out to me last meeting. From the top of that wall to the bottom, from the corner over to that window is 80 square feet.
It's a big sign.
We're extending that to the other side of that window. Now, we're talking a freestanding sign. Everybody thinks, well, this is a pole that's got a sign up there on it. But it doesn't have to be. That sign can be down on the ground. Think of what that is going to look like if it's sitting out there in the right-of-way, along the road, on the ground, to the next guy down 75 feet or 50 feet away with his sign. Keep in mind that in that area, the speed limit is 45 miles an hour. That means you have, if that sign blocks the sight for the next 100 feet, it takes 1 1/3 seconds before you go past that sign, before you can see the next sign down and pass it. 1 1/3 seconds. Now, is the guy next to this sign going to be happy with a 100 square foot sign? I don't think so. He's probably not going to be happy if that 80 square feet is on the ground. If it's up in the air, he's probably all right, because not that many businesses down there have pole signs. They're on the ground. Most of them are 32 square feet. But in view of the fact that the Board of Commissioners wants this okayed, I would say we should look at restricting a 100 square foot sign to having them have at least 200 square feet, or 200 linear feet of frontage, and it can't be any closer than 100 feet to the property line. So that means that if you've got 200 feet, you have to put it in the middle of that 200 feet. If he's got 300 feet, he could have it 100 feet from either side or anywhere in that middle 100 feet. That would take care of our problems down there.
Putting it over again.
But I don't really see the sense in it, but if we're gonna look at it that way, then make the restriction 100 square feet on a sign with at least 200 feet of frontage, and it has to be at least 100 feet from the property line.
Does the business down there have 200 lineal feet of frontage?
Yes.
Okay. Then I think that's a reasonable one, but I think you had a good idea on the electronic signs too.
Yeah, the electronic signs, the regulation, the way it's written right now, you can't have more than 3/4 of sign electronic. If our current requirement is 80 square feet, then you can't have more than 75 square feet of an electronic. Okay, we obviously had a reason for doing that, and I think it's because electronic signs are a lot more visible than regular signs, and we didn't want an 80 square foot electronic sign. If you've been down through there and you see the Eagle sign, you can see that from a mile and a half away. If we're gonna try and restrict it, rather than saying 75% of the sign, the 75% of an 80 square foot sign is 60 square feet, then we'll just say electronic signs can't be over 60 square feet.
So moved.
Yeah, I think that's the solution.
Well, that's just it,
How's
we can't do that. We still have to go through the public
Right.
hearing and,
But we can say that we agree with the 200 foot of frontage, 100 foot from the property line, and that we go with 60 square feet on electronic signs, and it's a very uncomplicated solution to the commissioner's concern.
If we're gonna allow a sign that big, should it be allowed in the right of way?
That's up to the,
Because that's such a.
That's up to the road
The road
commission.
committee.
If it's going to
that's road
obstruct
commission, that's.
traffic, then they're not gonna allow it. But I don't think, that's another one I don't think I wanna get into.
Okay. It's just a question.
Yeah. I mean, if it's on state highway, the state's gonna tell you, no, it can't be there. That's right back for it.
But that's not state highway.
No, but I say if it wasn't a state highway, that's the road commission. The road commission's gonna say you can have it in the right way or you can't. And right through there, the road commission's probably gonna be very careful because the right of way is not that clear.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I just noticed there are places where, I don't know if it's, sometimes there are obstacles, you go to pull out of the business and you're on the shoulder of the road before you can actually see if anybody's coming.
Yeah. That's why I was pointing out the size of that sign.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be up on a pole.
I'm noticing that this corner of VFW Road and 27.
No,
Yeah, trying to see around those vehicles and the snow pile in the corner.
Yep.
Yeah.
You see that on any corner where the road commission's piled up
Well,
snow.
and not only that, where the road curves away from you.
I mean, I remember back 70 years ago, 65 years ago, that when we had really a lot of snow, everybody had a little orange ball on the top of their radio antenna. That's when we had radio antennas on cars,
Mhm.
so you could see somebody coming up to the intersection.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
So I'd like Mike to go back and make those changes, and I think I think we should get a copy of that or something to the road commission that we're looking at a bigger sign or something, automatically send them a copy so they can look at clear vision. I think that's important that they get noticed on that, but I think those changes are easy, they get the solution to the commissioner's concerns, and we move on with some business other than this.
He's gonna have to word it, run through legal, and then we can do our public hearing. and-
Right, to Madam Chair's point, given the direction this evening, then staff will get on drafting an actual draft ordinance for review, likely at the next meeting, and of course have it reviewed by legal.
Where's the street?
Right next to the other side.
How far back onto it?
People the same. It's within the lot line, I think.